Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 18th Annual MIT Sloan CIO Symposium and the first digital edition. I'm your host, Alan Tate. This is episode 5, Building an Enterprise for the World Ahead. So for questions, please use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You may chat between yourselves, but we won't be monitoring the chat for questions. If you use social media, use hashtag MITCIO and join the community discussion. Post in the 2021 Symposium program under the topic Digitalization Trends. Well, we have Stephanie Woerner. She is a research scientist at the Center for Information Systems Research, or CISR. She's also an expert on how companies use technology and data to create more effective business models. Besides that, she is a pleasure to work with. Please join me in welcoming Stephanie Woerner.
Thank you so much for having me, and I am delighted to be here. Why don't we just get started right away? I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to talk today about digital transformation. And I'm going to introduce my panelists in just a couple of minutes. What I thought I would do first is just kind of do a setup, because they have lots and lots of important information to impart. And I want to really give them plenty of time to talk about their experiences and talk about the lessons learned. When we're talking about building an enterprise in the world ahead, we're really talking about transforming your enterprise. Making it so that it can compete in the digital economy. And what I do want to get across, and I think both George and Beth are going to hammer this point home, is that this is not really about technology. Technology is really important, but it's really a business transformation. And so with that, let's get started. First, I need to say thank you to MIT CISR. I am a research scientist at MIT CISR, and we do research that helps large companies succeed in the digital economy. If you would like to get access to our research briefings, please head on over to cisr.mit.edu and sign up, and we will be happy to let you read and access our research. So, what is a digital business transformation? A digital business transformation is what we call becoming future ready. And what does a future ready company look like? A future ready company is one that adapts and succeeds in any environment. And when I say any, I mean that it's got to have the agility, have the resilience to turn on a dime, to take advantage of opportunities, and really be open to what the opportunities are out there. A future-ready company operates with modular agility. So that means that this is a company that is really thinking about operational efficiency, automating, standardizing, and then most importantly, creating modular components that can be reused over and over again. So these are companies that are thinking about taking their crown jewels, what they're best at, service enabling them, and then combining them in different ways to engage their customers and to become more operationally efficient, to lower their cost of doing business. They're oriented around the customer voice and really bring that customer voice inside, amplify it. And this changes the way that you work internally we find that these companies become more iterative. They are using data in new and different ways. And then finally, they leverage partnering. Most future-ready companies realize that they can't do everything themselves, and they have to go and use their find partners who can add really important components so that you can create solutions for your customers. We find that most companies are in silos and spaghetti, where they're focusing on products and working in a complex landscape of process systems and data. And here you have great employees, but they're performing via heroics. The other kinds of companies are ones, you have some kinds of companies, more manufacturing types of companies that are really working along in an industrialized fashion, thinking about efficiency, developing the plug and play products and services, service and labeling their crown jewels, consolidating their data. Companies in this quadrant in industrialized are not as aware of what their customers want, but they're really setting themselves up for that. Other companies are in integrated experience where they're giving their customers a simulated integrated experience. They typically put a wrapper around and they simulate a great customer experience. Here are the numbers, the percentage of firms we find that 51% of firms are in silos and spaghetti, and all the way to 22% are future ready. And these numbers here are why you want to become future ready. These are net profit margin compared to industry. And you can see that companies that are future ready are highly more profitable than companies that are in any of the other quadrants. You can also see that if you do that hard slog along industrialized, you start to see some profitability metric. You start to see profitability improvements. So MIT Scissor has done research where we've identified 4 pathways to future ready. The first one, pathway 1, is one where I talked about companies moving through industrialized. A lot of manufacturing companies are here. It's a long, hard pathway, in part because if you look at that first part of the transformation, you're really putting your house in order. In some ways, we call it the eat your spinach first pathway. You've got to go and build up all of your capabilities. And the issue here is it's hard to keep momentum because you're not seeing some of the other exciting. You aren't seeing your customers being more engaged. It's hard to see if you're getting more sales. And so this is a pathway that it's hard to stay on because it really requires a lot of discipline, at least in the early stages. Once you get a little further along, you'll see kind of an uplift where you start to see both operational efficiency and customer experience kind of combining together, and you start to see better customer engagement and more revenues. The second pathway is an integrated experience, pathway 2, where a company really spends a lot of time engaging their customers, looking for hits in NPS. One of the issues with this pathway is that a lot of companies get sidelined, get really held up in this, oh, I've got more NPS, I'm going to do another investment in NPS, and stop and don't realize that really what they're doing is continuing to build that spaghetti. And at some point they have to make that right-hand turn and start to address their operational efficiency needs. It's a very exciting path, at least in the beginning, because you're seeing your customers really engage. A lot of companies do this because they see a threat from their from other competitors, and they need to keep their customers aligned with them. The third pathway is a Stairceps pathway. This is one where you have got a company that's not under severe threat, and they can do, say, a customer experience innovation and then integrate it in, and then do some more work on their operational efficiency. We find this to be a very popular pathway. The one issue with this pathway is you've got to signal where you're going. You're asking people to change their investments and to change their the ways, what they're focusing on. And so we find here governance is very important, as is a technical roadmap. And then finally, the last pathway, pathway 4, is where you kind of throw up your hands and say, we cannot get there from here, and you build a new business unit. And along each pathway are explosions. And that's what we're going to really spend a lot of time about. We're going to spend time talking about digital business transformation and the explosions. And this is where Beth and George have so much great knowledge. First, I'm going to show you some, we did a short poll with you all, and just wanted to show you the results. Beth and George are going to address these results. First is, what kind of threat from digital disruption is your enterprise facing? And you'll see that the majority of respondents said that they were under moderate threat. And I think we're going to push back on you and say, maybe you're under a little more threat than you might think. And then the biggest challenge to your enterprise's digital business transformation, I'm going to highlight the top 4. I think that we'll address most of these in the rest of the presentation. The first was the lack of resources, capacity, or talent. And this is really important in moving forward, because you have got to have the right people doing the right kind of work to actually maintain that momentum. I think both Beth and George know a lot about how to turn around a risk-averse culture. We also see that there's weak commitment and expertise from leadership, and I think that that couples quite nicely with unclear strategy and priorities. I did want to tell the audience that if you do want these slides, we'll figure a way, working with Alan, to make them available to you. And so here are our 2 panelists. First, we have George Corbin. He led Marriott's global digital transformation and grew digital revenue to nearly $14 billion while creating one of the world's largest e-commerce businesses. And at Mars, he launched global digital platforms that enabled business leaders to grow their reach and revenues. Quite exciting now. He's working as a board director and advisor, and he has a great depth of knowledge around digital transformation. Our other panelist is Beth O'Rourke. She is an executive leader with over 25 years of technology and business expertise, and has worked at Blue Cross Blue Shield, Staples, and a variety of other companies. Again, we are lucky to have her join this panel. And with that, I'm going to show, we've had some conversations around what are the 5 factors that are really important in addressing a digital business transformation, and how do you get there from here? And so what I thought I would do is start the conversation with George and Beth, talking about, really, let's talk about the center, where I talked about how you amplify the customer voice. What does it mean to put the customer in the center? And I'm going to turn it over. I think that George is going first here.
Sure. Thanks, Stephanie. And good to have you with us, Stephanie. For those who don't know, there's no minute like the last minute. It's when everything seems to decide it's going to update on you. I haven't had that happen to me since yesterday, so I can completely appreciate how well composed you appear right now. So thanks. I've spent the last 21 years on digital transformation for a lot of large incumbent companies who pretty much had this common thread across all of them, and that is their business was being disrupted, whether they realized it at the time or not. The most pervasive reason across the board for any of these is this one that sits at the center of this circle, and that's about the customer. In the survey that Stephanie did, about 40% of you came back and said that the strategy was unclear. I'm going to double down on that one, because I will say you're also going to probably find it's more unclear than you think. This is where we had to make the biggest shift. So if I think of I'll pick on the Marriott example when I worked at Marriott. We really had to, this was the most fundamental shift that also contributed to our eventual success. Stephanie mentioned, the customer's voice. No company says they're not customer focused. What is different is you have to become pathologically obsessed with solving your customer's problem. And this leads to another very fundamental shift, shifting you from being a product-oriented company with a product-oriented mindset to one that is about the job to be done for the customer. What is the customer's job they're trying to get done, and how can you solve that? This is a big shift for us. Typically, how a lot of companies will operate is, here's our product, who can we sell it to? This shift was, what is this customer trying to get done? Where are they encountering friction, resistance, frustration, what have you, or added cost? And then what do we need to do to compete better there? And this is where most disruption has come from. This is where the little insurgents have displaced the incumbents. So get in there, remove these negative factors. So if I take an example like when at Marriott Mobile, when we decided to push into mobile, we looked at the entire customer experience journey, not just like booking a hotel, but everything from when they're first thinking about making a trip, till they book the trip, till they're on the road, head to the hotel, then they're in the hotel. Every moment there, what we found is we follow travelers around, and we found new moments of angst. And we thought, where can we make a difference? So anxiety spikes if your flight's delayed. Anxiety spikes if your room's not ready. Anxiety spikes if you're waiting in line to check in anywhere, if something's wrong with your room. So using this consumer data, we then created a whole new product strategy built around these moments. And when we deployed them, things that you take for granted, right? Mobile check-in and mobile check-out and doing service requests through your phone. When we deployed these, we saw our net promoter score, intent to recommend, double compared to our previously most successful initiative, which is switching out all the bedding in all the hotels, which is a big effort, right? This upped it, this doubled it. So I'd say the main story here is points of struggle are where your innovation takes root. A guy named Bob Moesta said that. And that's it. Look for those points of struggle, and then build your product and your business strategy and your business model around those.
That's a great point, George. I think I'm totally on board with that. The customer needs to be at the center. One of the things that I found is really outside in, thinking about how you operate, right? And that's what you're saying, versus inside out. And if you think of the different companies that I've had the opportunity to work for, it's been interesting to see how that transaction mindset had to change over to a customer experience mindset, and that you started focusing on the outside in and get the voice of the customer, NPS, as you mentioned. Surprising though, in this our first poll question around 25% don't think there's a threat to their world, and I can't think of an industry that isn't under digital transformation activities. So we'll push on that and see if we can get some questions or even feedback in the Q&A that what industry isn't under fire? Even your local dog walking service is under fire. So
yeah, caught my eye too. Completely agree.
Yeah, I really do agree with that. And I think that George and Beth, your points about bringing the customer in first really ups the demands for a transformation, because what we found in our framework is it really requires companies to become ambidextrous, actually doing both of these at the same time. Yep. And I think we'll explore more of that as we look at these 5 things. Why don't we go on to the next piece, which is really around people. I think that we saw that in the first answer to the question, which is what kind of capacity do we see lacking? And I think, Beth, you're going to take the first shot at this one, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, even the episode before us, Rapid Shift in Talent, episode 4 that was hosted last week, talked about talent, right? And the war for talent. And what we found in my experience is that you have to make it, buy it, and rent it. There's no other way to really keep up with everything. So when you think of talent internally, there's certain, from a technology standpoint, there's certain team members you need. and you got to go find them and get them and draw them. And the strategy, really, the purpose of why you're doing this is really the draw. Certainly, there's a lot of competition out there. I found that you have to make the talent and capacity through transforming your core systems, your systems of record, your everyday work, if you will, optimize that so that you can move the talent, find out what talent can move, upskill them, and create some of the capacity yourself through automation. And then once you create that capacity, really working with that team to align to what outcomes you want to achieve as a company. Those were some of the pieces that we put in place while I was at Blue Cross. Another piece I would say is partnering with HR is critical. If you don't have that partnership to go find those different areas of talent and different diverse pools and creating them from the outside in, being some of the companies where you can get apprenticeships or certainly internships to come join your team is a way. And then finally, through strategic partners. This could be your first time you're doing it, could be a couple times, but in being able to bring in strategic partners to really bolster what you're trying to do and having the right ratio. Certainly, if you buy too much and you have skinny internal IP, that's going to hurt you as well in the long run. So that balance is going to be critical on how you get resources really put together to meet the needs. And I know, George, you have a couple of points here too.
Yeah, well, you made a couple of really good ones, and I'll add to those too. You made the point about rent, buy, build, and it applies. We usually think of this around technology, or I think we'll talk a bit about that too, but also around people. We're in a point now where there is a lot of, I guess I'll call it magic on tap. Used to be you've got to hire and build it all, but in fact you can go out and you can rent a lot of the arsenal of scale that you couldn't before. So if it's going to be mission critical for you to scale, but you're not sure yet just how successful this thing's going to be, you want some option value. So is it better to go off and actually rent data science, to rent aspects around performance marketing, so that is a great new asset that you have at your disposal, especially when you're still trying to get your legs under you and kind of prove the financials of this. A couple other things. Here's one that proved to be mission critical for me, and that is, if you're an incumbent company, new hires are one of the hardest things to do. Right? There's always hiring freezes. There's all this. But there are things that I call no regrets hires. That regardless of which direction you end up taking, of the 4 different journey lines that Stephanie pointed out, of how far or not far you're going to go, there are certain types of talent you're going to need. And so this shouldn't be much of a debate. Hire them and then let them build to scale as you need. For me, I found these to be in things like customer acquisition marketing, data science. I mean, no matter where we're going in the future, we're going to need data to power the path there. And I'd say product management. Any customer doing business with us online, you need products, digital products, websites, apps, whatever. So you need product management talent, people who also know Agile, things of that sort. So, and it's not just technical skills. You want folks who I would say are going to be your own intrapreneurs. So they should come in with the technical capacity, but also the ability to understand and be able to build that piece of the business. That will give you huge amplifying power. I also, as I thought, there's something else I wanted to mention, because what I've seen is a lot of companies go to the org structure first. And here's the thing, the org structure doesn't solve anything. If you don't have the strategy right, if you don't have the goals clear, if you don't have the vision of the destination clear, no matter moving boxes around on an org chart is going to deliver anything for you. For us, when we got that middle bit, that customer bit right, we figured out, what? Here are the big halo moments in the customer experience that matter. We then restructured ourselves entirely around that. And the important theme here is structure must follow strategy, not the other way around. So we actually reorged around these customer moments so that we had a single leader responsible for each one, teams built up below them. And then if anything was going wrong, if performance was slipping, you know exactly who to go to. They are measured on it. They are bonused on it. They have their KPIs aligned against it. And I tell you, we accelerated and we were adding $1.25 billion per year during a time when the rest of the business was single-digit growth. So this really has an impact of having folks who own and live and breathe those key moments, and then have the capabilities layered into that, whether it's UX, whether it's content platforms, whether it's performance marketing, capability owners who then matrix into any of those. Anybody who needs those resources can tap into those resources.
This is great information, and it really aligns a lot with the research that we have done on this framework. When you talk about getting the talent, having no regret hires, one of our case studies is on KPN, which is a telecom, and they had actually outsourced their talent too much and realized that if they were going to have a successful transformation, they needed to hire the right kind of talent, and really around developers and people who knew how to develop Agile, and they could start to change. We'll come back to this and we'll when we get to culture, but sometimes that talent's actually going to be key to changing your culture. And as both Beth and George said, sometimes our research shows that really going with structure first is problematic, because a transformation is going to upend everything, and you really don't want to freeze things into place too soon. But I think one of the things that's not going to be upended if you deal with it early is going to be the processes that you put into place. This idea around creating end-to-end processes, and I'd like to put the question out to you two. What kinds of processes have you seen challenged to change due to a transformation?
Want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay. I guess my answer to what processes, all of them.
Okay.
So, I mean, ultimately, a transformation is you are looking at every aspect of the operation and saying, is this fit for purpose? If the customer's buying new ways, if distribution is happening through new channels, if production and supply chain work, you've got to look at everything, and that's certainly what I've experienced. We started, in the case I gave you, we started with the customer-facing stuff first. So build the ability for self-service, whether through the website or the app, customer care, sales channels, et cetera. But then if you're talking about manufacturing and logistics, I mean, everything there is lending itself now to automation, right? And then even into what's more of the back office types of things, certainly marketing. HR is going through a complete transformation as a function in all companies, and also finance and even functions like budgeting. These are the back office engines that shape how decisions are made and capital is allocated and how work gets done. So an early mistake that I made was thinking that the digital transformation was about building this direct channel to the customer and doing that really well. We did that, but I will say that some of the biggest obstacles are internal. When you need customer care to actually handle problems that started by ordering online, then you've got to pivot how customer care takes place. When you're looking at building out new products in cycles of weeks or months, not years, we used to have a 7-year capital allocation cycle. It's like it's ridiculous, right? All that internal machinations has to change. So here's what you've got. I mean, you've got in an incumbent company, you have legacy processes that were built for scale production. Essentially, it's copy, paste, repeat. And that's perfect. Your focus is efficiency and to squeeze out variance and to squeeze out cost. But this prevents innovation. This prevents adaptation. So we started with the customer And we work backwards from the customer and says, all right, here's the things we're going to build. Here's the things we're going to change. But like that example I gave of mobile, behind the curtain, this is where it got tough. It was no longer just about building an app on a smartphone. To successfully deliver things like, you're doing a mobile check-in or a mobile checkout, we actually had to get back into the guts of the operation with our operations counterparts and store people who work in stores and hotels, et cetera. And we had to what we call hunt as a pack. So it's not just the digital team. It was everybody had to be aligned on the same goal and marching in the same direction with the same priorities. So with this, we took what I'd say were absolutely mission critical to this. If I were to list the things that had the most impact on a change of the processes, the people, and everything around that, first of all, we had to do joint and collective ruthless prioritization. Every project, not just digital projects, every project was in competition for the same types of resources, and certainly the engineering resources. From there, you build a joint enterprise roadmap, or you put all of the cross dependencies, you map them out explicitly. And that changed the entire approach to enterprise planning and budgeting. It was no longer things in silos. We had to open this up together because we were making hard trade-offs, right? I mean, nobody was ultimately happy about some of the trade-offs, but they understood the trade-offs that had to be made. And I'll add one other point on this. The other thing this changes is governance and approval processes. Everybody here who's ever worked in a big company, even a not so big company, one of the frustrations tends to be, well, for risk mitigation, we have these approval processes. You go through this committee and then that committee and then sign off by the board or what have you. If you're moving, so this future enterprise, the hallmark is going to be resilience and adaptability. And a key part of resilience and adaptability is it doesn't take you 6 months to make up your mind on something. So we had, for example, decision rights that I can think of one project. We had one project that ended up having 21 other projects and initiatives all over the company dependent upon it. So basically there was $40 million in capital tied up by this one project in terms of its ripple effect. So we couldn't wait 6 months or, well, we need this SVP and this EVP, and she's on the road for 3 weeks and this other one's not back for is out on leave or what have you. It's like, no. So we set up approval cycles that were built on the team's agile schedule, not on the executive schedule. And what that meant was, in this case, every Friday morning at 9 a.m., we would have the CIO, the CDO, the CMO, et cetera, in this room to handle any decisions, changes, or resource allocation needed, because a huge chunk of the future of the company was now dependent upon being fast and agile in decision making. And so that's a crucial thing. And basically, you put the company on the team's schedule, not the other way around.
Yeah, I agree with that, George. I think picking up on your investment, you can't lock and load at the beginning of the year and expect the same outcome all the way through. And that's what a budgeting process has been. It's like we have an annual budget and you got to stick with that. So I introduced a rolling budget. Now, certainly on the digital side, if you have to bring in your renting or buying talent, you have to make sure that you have the right overall financial model around it, whether it's capacity or whatnot. And that is interesting because it's going from product kind of assets, right? Digital assets versus projects, a beginning and the end. There is no end to a product. And so how do you allocate funding and investments to that? So really tricky, but yet you have to make the change and you have to partner with your finance team. So we ended up on a quarterly basis monitoring for sure those agile teams to make sure we're getting the right outcomes and progressing with the right velocity, but also being able flexible that you're not, this is our plan for the year or not going to change. Well, COVID happened, right? And everyone changed really quick and really fast. So having that flexibility is important. The other point I want to make is those shared corporate services areas, spot on. They all have to change with you. For example, real estate, the building facilities. How do you want to operate? You're putting people in pods. Now in the future, it may be virtual pods a little bit longer, but you still are putting people physically together and changing the high walls and changing that. We had to get real estate involved. We had to get the vendor management office involved because you're buying tools, and that rapid tool process can't be a 3-month RFP, a selection, and whatnot. You need to move. So we had to bring in the VMO. We had to bring in, certainly we talked about HR, and I would say the last one is from an overall standpoint, and have that overall alignment, like you said, with the prioritization. So those were all key processes, underlying processes that you don't think about, but they have to change. Legal, legal's got to be on board as well, with security.
Well, very interesting in the way that you're talking about this, because one of the first things, at least in our research, that we found is that both of you talked about making sure that you have what I call the right decision rights, getting that governance in place, because you've got to have you've got to have the people in place to oversee who has the authority to make an investment, who has the authority to make a customer offer. And rather than structure, it's really getting these kinds of questions answered that really get your digital transformation jump-started. I see we have 20 minutes left, and what I thought we would do is spend maybe 5 minutes or so on data and technology, and then let's leave culture and mindset. I mean, I think that's the big elephant in the room. And so let's devote a lot of time to that one. But when we talk about data and technology, Beth, what were some of the technology changes that were required that you needed to get in place to really drive that transformation?
Yeah, it looks like on the poll, it was about 30%, the fifth bullet, that had outdated technology. I think we've been working on technology. I actually don't think digital transformation is really a technology problem. Certainly a good component of it, but I think technology has been, we've had to update a lot of our technology because of security, and making sure that we could patch. We also had to make sure we expose the data. Data is everything to many businesses. If you look at the businesses that I've been in, particularly insurance and healthcare, it's only about the data. So if you don't unlock that data so that people can get insight and then take action, whatever department it is, you got to make that available. But what we found is really having a strong operational backbone, your core systems, your system of records. How do you expose that data in an API? Lots of different API technology out there these days. So you're going to have to think of what's best for you. But on the flip side, how do you create this digital platform to consume some of that data and reach out to the various stakeholders? Because it could be an app or a website, but it also could be integrating with a third party. And then you get into, what's the best operating model for speed, and you get into cloud. So all that together, exposing the data to actually take action for creating the business outcome you want that meets the customer need. A piece, I think, in that, as you think about all of technology, is making sure that the right operational models in place, the right stability, the right security models in place, and that you get a chance to really accelerate what you've done in the past. These core systems are 10, 20, 30, even longer systems, but your digital platform layer and their exposure of the APIs to maybe external developers are less than a year, potentially, right? So you're moving faster, not your whole digital platform, but the components on it. So very critical aspect to a foundational part of your transformation.
Well, and George, I mean, one of the questions that we have here is how do you tell how much of your data is good data? That I throw that out as part of this conversation.
Well, I can't tell you what the answer to that's going to be. Here's what I'd say. My view on data is this. Data used to be, and we suffered this. Data was basically islands and silos. special purpose to be used against a specific set of narrow questions by a department or two, right? And you couldn't open that up. It was inaccessible. Then we discovered, yes, oh, there's a cleanliness, there's a hygiene problem with the data. So then tens of millions goes into, all right, how do we clean up the data? And then some folks realize, you know what, maybe we're getting a little OCD on how clean it has to be. What we really need to do is open this stuff, create data hubs, create data lakes, just make it more accessible. And then as we bring in and start to apply AI and machine learning, it starts to sort out what's usable, what's applicable, et cetera. A fundamental mindset shift has been, for certain companies, data has not been a core strategy. It hasn't been a driver of the strategy. It's more like been performance data of how the strategy is doing. Basically, it's glorified reporting. The shift now, and the companies that are getting all the valuation and all the growth, are those who have stepped back and said, actually, it's not about data. What we're doing is we're trying to build an intelligence factory. An intelligence factory gets into the data availability and accessibility. It gets into the need for APIs. It gets into the need for cloud. Some of the things that Beth just mentioned, I mean, that's really what's prompting this, because ultimately this intelligence factory, taking the data, data scientists getting on applying AI and ML, doing algorithm engineering, it starts to determine what your new product development roadmap is. It starts to determine how you're actually doing marketing in more targeted, relevant fashion, how you're doing that for product management. All of these things are now driven by it instead of data being at the tail of the pipe, right? So we were in a situation that we had deep technical debt. Kind of like Beth described, right? These crusty old systems, nobody knew how to spell API. Even the website architecture itself was 12 years old. And it's like, you've got to get out of this. And what brought it home for us was when we had to start exposing things to the consumer through the mobile app, things like the ability to check in, things like the ability to choose the room you want to stay in, it cast a very harsh light on just how old, antiquated, and unfit our legacy systems were. That is what catalyzed this path to say, we got to renovate this. We've got to dig out of this 10, 15-year-old technical debt hole and start investing. And so that's what we ended up doing. But I would say any company and anybody in this webinar too should be thinking of data in a way that it will drive the company's strategy. And then build from there. What is it you will be able to use data to actually drive on the strategy? It's not the other way around.
Great. Now let's get to one of the hardest intractable questions, which is really around culture and mindset. And George, one of the questions that we have in the Q&A is, how do you balance leadership? And Beth, I'm sure you've run into this too. How do you balance leadership as well with empowering teams? I will quickly say that this is actually one of the things that we've seen about leaders having to change from a command and control to a coach and communicate. And that actually turns out to be one of the biggest practices that we've seen influence how far along you get in your transformation. But I'd love to hear from the two of you.
Sure. So let me address the leadership one first. Now, I noticed in the survey, the number two problem that people cited was a risk-averse culture. And I have seen that in spades. I think we've all experienced that. Classic line is culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So leadership plays a vital role in that. And then there's a few other things as well that if you want to look at levers to pull to start to change culture, but let me address the leadership one first. I think of it as follows. There are 4 leadership crucibles, sort of 4 situations calling for a certain types of leadership that are quite distinctive. You can have, if your company is largely in steady state, right? Decent rate of growth, decent predictability around the industry, then absolutely the type of leader you want is somebody who knows the industry well, has sort of mastered that, knows the playbook inside and out, and knows therefore how to sort of lead through this situation of let's do more just incrementally, better each year on this. The other situation is if you're in a turnaround situation. So something's gone wrong. You're actually losing money. You are either out of sync with the industry, or for what other reasons. You need somebody more of a leadership style of the turnaround. This is going to be more command control. This is going to be more, we're going to have to shed some assets. We're going to have to exit some businesses. We're going to have to invest over here. As you move into something that is higher uncertainty in the industry, and let's say a negative impact on growth, is where you need the transformation leader. Somebody who is more comfortable with ambiguity, somebody who is also basically leading a bit of an internal revolution because you're changing every aspect of the business. And so therefore, who is very good at building alliances, and this hunt as a pack that I alluded to before, because you can't do it alone. You need to bring in co-revolutionaries to help you drive this forward. And so with that comes a greater degree, there's much more of a premium on alignment, collaboration, and seeding innovation, or letting innovation grow in different areas around the company. But there's no way you can be authoritarian and really know, here's what the right answer is. The one thing you do need to have is make sure that you're not delegating a transformation, because push comes to shove, a lot of people will not transform themselves. So you'll need a bit of a firm hand on the tiller, but also encouraging and bringing in the right, again, co-revolutionaries as part of this. The other is this thing of the pioneer. So if you're transforming your business, that's what I just described. But if you're actually saying, we're building an entirely new business, an entirely new business model, we're going places we haven't been yet, and it's going to be a bit threatening to the rest of the company, but we've got to go there. Here's where you need the captain who is sees the beach. And this is much more what you see in the startups, where you find this culture of, it's not authority and autocracy. It is, how do we build in agile into our methods? How do we build in a test and learn mentality, which becomes a very important part of the culture for any of us? That's where you find this. So leadership matters, and having the right sort of captain in the chair will make a huge difference, because then that then cascades into other things. One, they lead by example. They set the tone for the culture at the top. If you are going to, sorry, was that, Stephanie, was that you saying something? Was that just an echo for me?
No, that was an echo.
Okay, sorry. Because the thing is, fear of risk is something we are all running into. Fear of risk is used as an excuse to not take action. And that becomes the biggest risk of all, because that's what leads to obsolescence. In an efficient market, the companies that win are those that do a better job of taking risk, not those who do a better job of avoiding risk. There's a difference between playing to win and playing to not lose. And this is why having the right captain in that position is going to make a big difference. Another huge lever for culture change is the impact of a universal KPI. So if you're building something new, so like at Marriott, when we were building something new, this whole new direct-to-consumer experience, and then this mobile experience, each of those had a KPI. And that KPI was held not just by the head of digital, but by all the groups that were a part of making that happen. And that ended up changing a lot of the mindset, because suddenly everybody has to grab an oar to row the boat.
Yeah, I spot on. Totally agree on the two models, and having the right leadership, a mindset. It definitely starts at the top. I do think there's subcultures in organizations. Technology sometimes has their own culture. And really the grassroots up is also important, particularly with innovation and creating a learning culture and that growth mindset. I found that talking about culture change, and George and I talked about this offline earlier, is talking about culture change, but not demonstrating it, not making it tangible to the individual. Because you can talk about this and recognize it and know that culture eats, I would say, breakfast, lunch, and dinner completely out of an organization if you don't address it. That's definitely a lesson for me, having been in the CIO seat, something that you have to address with your organization, but you have to make it real, and you have to talk about it, and you have to talk about when is it okay to take the risks and when is it not, because it's mission critical. And those conversations and that collaboration, that openness with your team is very important to have. But those small wins that you find with your team, either taking a risk or doing some innovation, it working out, and bubbling that up all the way to the top. Because we tend to, shout inside of one organization, but, shouting across is just as important. So I think culture is critical and pervasive in every corner of your organization. And if you think you only can go top down, I'd encourage bottom up as well, to meet and hopefully meet in the middle to move it forward.
Well, the 2 points I'd say there is when we've seen some really important organizational change, it is like top down, certainly setting a goal and a vision, and then this bottom up. Sometimes it's communities of practice, sometimes it's some other kind of way of having the bottom up, but that's where you really see a opportunity for a lot of change. And then I also want to reiterate George's overall KPI as being really motivating. 2 case studies that we've done. One was Schneider Electric. As part of their transformation, they decided that cross-selling, percentage of their revenues that come from cross-selling, was going to be a really important measure for them, because it emphasized a lot. It emphasized that their customer experience was getting better. It emphasized that they were actually consolidating and integrating data. It meant that they were rationalizing their ERP systems. And then the other one that we've seen is DBS Bank set customer hours saved, and that really got people on board. And so I think I would say for that's another piece. So I think with Beth, this, how do you get your people, how do you go and get both top down and bottom up? And then how do you get a metric that really kind of is like follow the flag? We have 2 minutes left. Do you have, George and Beth, do you have any kind of closing statements that you want to give to everybody?
Well, look, to me, the primary thing around this is, the topic of the talk was around, building the enterprise for the world ahead. And I think the way we need to think of this is not, the quote new normal, which we're all tired of hearing, is not just we've just switched from track A to track B, move the whole train to track B. It's not that, because any disruption of any kind of vector can hit us. Really what being future ready is you're building a resilient organization. And some of the things we talked about will apply to any sort of impact that you get from any quarter, to say we have to be able to adapt and adjust as a way of life. And that's where you need these new agile processes and the accessibility to data and talent on tap, but also on staff that are the right ones who can scale or descale the organization. And this culture and this mindset that says, we tolerate failure as shots on goal to get us to the next spot. We don't retreat once there's a setback. All that is vital resilience for this organization, regardless of what's going to get thrown at us.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I would say every organization is different. Every organization needs a little bit of tailoring, but these 5 factors will at least have you think about in detail, what do you have to do and what do you have to partner on with your peers or with your executive management team on saying, hey, I need a little bit more of X. Maybe that's sponsorship above so that you can get everybody aligned better. Maybe that's changing in the way you invest. But I think it really gets you thinking about how do we compete in this market, because everyone needs to compete and everyone's looking to win, and there's blurring of lines across industries, and this is kind of the way forward, and having that flexibility and nimbleness is critical.
Well, thank you, George and Beth. This has been a great panel, very exciting, and I'm going to turn it back to Alan.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, George, and Beth, for that great discussion. That was a demonstration of real-time resilience and quick thinking in the face of technical issues. So to the audience, let's continue the conversation. Post your thoughts in the 2021 Symposium program under the topic Digitalization Trends. Join us tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time for Episode 6, Accelerated Digital Transformation. Where will we land? Also, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Replays will be posted to the 2021 Symposium program agenda. That's it for today. Bye for now.